I've now had my YT Jeffsy Base 29 for a little under 2 months. That's been enough for 150 miles of mostly trail riding, including a few bumps along the way. It's also been enough time for me to form a pretty strong opinion about this bike. First though, I do need to start with some caveats. As a beginner, I don't have much to compare the Jeffsy to, and because of the coronavirus pandemic, I've only been able to ride in my local area. So I don't know how the Jeffsy feels compared to some other bike, or how it would handle Moab. But I do know how it feels to me. It probably makes sense to start with why I chose the Jeffsy. Like most people these days, I think, when I'm considering a big purchase, I go online and research it to death. But this was a real challenge to do with mountain bikes. There are a million technical details that go into a bike, and a beginner like me just isn't gonna understand all of them. The most common advice for beginners is to start with a used hardtail, and in general I think that's good advice. But I did have a hardtail back when I was in high school. I never did much trail riding with it, but I knew enough to know that for the rooty trails around here, I probably wanted something full suspension. I also knew I probably wanted something that would ship directly to me because the bike shops were all closed due to COVID, and also because I wanted to maximize the bang for my buck. What ultimately sold me on the Jeffsy was Outdoor Gear Lab, which rated it the best mountain bike under $2,500 for 2020. I've had great success in the past buying things that Outdoor Gear Lab recommends, and their review of the 2020 Jeffsy is pretty glowing. Varying forms of the word confidence appear in it 8 times. After riding the bike, I understand why. The Jeffsy feels capable of handling anything I can throw at it. In all of my crashes, dabs, pedal strikes, and other miscellaneous screw-ups, I've never once felt like anything was the bike's fault. When I'm riding it, I feel like the only limitation is my own skill. Before buying it, I was primarily worried about 2 things: how easy it would be to assemble, and whether the lack of a lockout switch on the rear shock would cause problems when climbing. But as you may have seen in my How to Build a Jeffsy video, the assembly process isn't too bad, even for a total beginner. Hanging the rear derailleur is a little confusing, but hopefully my video clears up what the instruction manual fails to. And as for the shock not having a lockout, I honestly haven't noticed it at all when climbing. Total non-issue, at least for me so far. The Outdoor Gear Lab review does call out a few shortcomings, which include its weight and the SX Eagle drivetrain. But the weight certainly hasn't stopped me from doing anything. And while I'm sure there are nicer drivetrains, the SX Eagle has treated me just fine so far. Honestly, for a new full suspension mountain bike under $2,500, I was expecting I'd have to make some real compromises. And maybe on paper there are some. But out on the trails, nothing about this bike feels like a compromise. And if you doubt this, go look up some other videos. I'm not good enough to really shred with it yet, but you can find videos of Jeffsys holding their own on pretty much any kind of trail, and even at the bike park. If I have to make a complaint, I guess it would be that the plastic frame on the bottom of the bike is loose enough that dirt and grit can still get into it pretty easily, and you have to remove it to clean it out properly. That said, removing it takes about 2 seconds, and it has kept that section of my frame from getting scratched, so even that's not really a downside. Granted, I'm only 150 miles in. Obviously, I expect this bike to hold up to a lot more abuse, and there's a chance it may not. But so far, I really have nothing but good things to say about this bike. Is it the best beginner mountain bike? Maybe. I don't think there's a single best bike for everyone. But if we're talking about full suspension bikes, the Jeffsy gives you a lot of fun and power in a package that's approachable and affordable. Well, affordable by mountain bike standards. I rode bikes a lot as a kid, but it had been years since I'd ridden one more than a mile, and I'd never touched any real trails before. With the Jeffsy, I was able to hop on and feel comfortable and in control pretty much immediately, even though my first trail ride was, by necessity, a blue trail with a fair amount of tech and jank. To me, that makes it a pretty great beginner bike, and based on the other reviews, I'm pretty confident that it's not just a beginner bike. This is a bike that I can take with me on my journey from total beginner to, hopefully, grizzled local shredder, and know that it's more than equipped to handle every step of the way. If you're interested in the Jeffsy, subscribe to my channel to follow my trail riding and trail building adventures with it. And don't forget to check out the build video if you do end up ordering one. It'll save you some trouble and make you feel better about the build process.